Entering the 1920s, Mao already had a rich background in politics and education. He was one of the few Chinese people who were literate, and was even educated in post-secondary studies. Although he actually worked for the KMT previously, his ideas began to change rapidly as he continued his studies. While traveling through China, Mao instigated labor rebellions against Kuomintang landlords. Raised rurally, Mao had a special interest in the potential of the peasants, who were greatly looked down upon by his urban-oriented colleagues. In early 1927, after studying the conditions of the rural people in his home province, Mao wrote his seminal Report on an Investigation of the Peasant Movement in Hunan, in which he predicted that the future of the government would be greatly dictated by the peasant groups, who would be the greatest power in the country. Mao's early propaganda was based on the unexplored power of the peasants. He would create posters in which the peasants rose to the same level as the city dwellers, no longer seen as a lesser people. Mao believed that if he gained the support of the peasants, their power in numbers would be indisputably greater than the other parties. In the early 1930s, Mao helped to establish and became the leader of the Soviet Republic of China, the early Communist Party of China. Mao offered refuge to communists under persecution to the central government and built a small army, the Red Army, to defend his domain. The Red Army was a mobile and guerrilla army with only 45,000 soldiers at its peak. As the Red Army achieved more success, nationalist groups by the government were sent to destroy the communists. Led by Chiang Kai-shek, the nationalists were fairly successful in driving the communists out of many rural areas, but failed to crush the communists entirely. What stopped the communists from being entirely destroyed by the Kuomintang was ultimately the Second Sino-Japanese War. As the government was forced to send troops to meet the invading Japanese forces, the communists were relieved of some of the pressure placed on them by the pressing Kuomintang. Despite this, both the Kuomintang and the Communists ended up fighting the Japanese in China. After the Second Sino-Japanese War and World War II, a Chinese civil war was in full force. Mao and the Communists struggled to take control of the country from Chiang Kai-shek and the Kuomintang. This would lead to American involvement, with them immediately supporting the Kuomintang in fear of communism spreading. The Communists, however, had the support of the Soviet Union. Although the Kuomintang had a much larger military force, they were not able to defeat the Communists because Mao's use of guerrilla warfare was more effective. The Kuomintang was heavily reliant on foreign aid from Western powers in the form of weaponry and troops. To combat this, Mao's communists would employ guerrilla tactics by cutting off supply lines, thus weakening the nationalists greatly. Although the communists did receive foreign support from the Soviet Union, they were not dependent, making the communists self-sustaining, ultimately allowing them to fight for a much longer period of time. The Kuomintang also experienced internal conflicts. The generals that were chosen based on loyalty to Chiang Kai-shek rather than tactical brilliance, resulting in great amounts of jealousy and rivalry, all of which Chiang was oblivious to. This would result in hypocritical and contradictory views being reflected by the Nationalist Party. The Communists, on the other hand, were incredibly focused on driving a single ideology to liberated areas, appealing to greater masses. Mao believed in the power of the people.